Thank you very much. We want to get going. All right. I have been invited to provide you with an update on the Society of the Sacred Heart, and I do that in my role as provincial. So, and I have like 10 minutes. So, in my role as provincial, which as I say to students when I'm visiting our schools, what's a provincial? I'm the head nun. And that essentially means that I, with the provincial team, provincial council, am responsible for the spiritual and apostolic animation of the Society of the Sacred Heart in Canada and the United States, which means it's a privileged position. It's a position of service, leadership as service, and it allows me to be in relationship with my sisters, associates, alumni and alumni, and our school communities. So I want to give the update on the society through the lens of these communities with whom I am in relationship. So about our sisters, the Religious of the Sacred Heart. We are approximately 185 RSCJs living in Canada and the United States. 10 of that number serve abroad, Africa, Rome, Indonesia. I think those are the highlights right now. Many times I'm asked, well, tell me about sister so-and-so or this sister. So our median age is 81. We have 5 retirement communities. Most of you think we have 2. So we have Oakwood, and on the Oakwood campus, we have the whole range of the kind of care that elders need, from independent living to assisted living to skilled care. We have a wonderful staff of 50 people. CNAs, nurses, we have wonderful pastoral ministry team. And because it's on the same campus as a school, there's a lot of energy and it's wonderful. And many of you are very connected to Oakwood. We also have a wonderful community in Albany. And in Albany, we have a community called Avila. And at Avila, we have independent and the beginning of assisted. We have a full-time CNA who's there 5 days a week. We have a part-time RN. In addition to Avila, we have an RSCJ community at Teresian House. Teresian House is a skilled care center. And then we have some other additional sisters living in the Albany area. But we opened up a retirement community at the Sarah community in St. Louis. And that, for us, although it's all the levels of care, for us, it's independent care. When one of our sisters needs more assistance, she chooses to go to Albany or to go to Oakwood. And then we have opened up a community outside of Boston in a town called Framingham, and that community is called Carmel Terrace. And that group of RSCJs, independent care. It happens to be administered by the same sisters who run Teresian House. So that is where our retired sisters are. Now, our Canadian retired sisters have traditionally been in a wonderful place called Caritas. But our last sister, Sister Chi, died recently. So right now, none of us is at Caritas. But it is certainly a wonderful place. But in addition to that, we have some really fun new initiatives. And one of them is a brand new community house that we've opened in New Orleans, the Sophia Barra House. And there we have 3 professed religious of the Sacred Heart living with a candidate. Yes, we have 2 candidates and one of our novices. We in the United States are the physical host of one of our 3 international noviceships. Most of the novices, that noviceship is in Chicago, and most of the novices there right now are European. So in her second semester, a novice does a 3-month ministry. And so we have one of our novices living in New Orleans doing her 3-month ministry, living with our 3 professed and our candidate who has just entered the society. So in addition to her, we have a candidate who entered back at the end of August and has been working at our school at Greenwich and living at the Rebecca House community in White Plains. So we have that. Another very important initiative, and this brings us into what's going on in the International Society, which is a reconfiguration. What does that mean? That means for the sake of mission, starting in 2016, when one of the calls of the chapter was to act as one body, we have been moving towards how can we better structure our governance in order to be more nimble for the sake of God's people. And so this has led to a commitment to move away from 33 provinces and districts to 8 provinces. And so of immediate interest to you is that our future province, which will be called ANAM, A-N-A-M, Antilles, North America, and Mexico, which means in Arabic, blessed. I always say we had a baptismal name, ANAM, because we used to refer to that when all those provincial teams would work together from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, from Canada, from the United States, from Mexico. We called it ANAM. But in the chapter of 2024, we were confirmed with that name because what we see is this reconfiguration of Canada, Cuba, Haiti, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and the United States is a whole new way forward for us to channel our energy and to, as I said, not just be more nimble, but more responsive to the needs of God's people. And an exciting example of what could be the fruit of this new structure is a community that the province of Mexico has opened in Tijuana, which is a simple walk to the border into San Diego. And so our sisters from the United States, Canada province living in San Diego are working with our sisters in Mexico. And that's important because we've had as a congregation to withdraw from Haiti because of the obvious tragic and violent situation there. But a group of the sisters who had been serving in Haiti worked with the 2 provincial teams, USC and Mexico, in recognizing there's a huge, desperate need of Haitian people who are caught on the border between Mexico and the States. So the purpose of the community in Tijuana is to serve the Haitian community that currently is living in tents on the border. So those are just some of the examples of, on the one hand, we are attentive to the care of our sisters who, by the way, are fully active as mentors, spiritual directors, accompaniers, and members of boards of trustees while in retirement communities. So we're attentive to that, wanting to be sure they have everything they need. And at the same time, we are very much about looking forward and responding to the needs of God's people. Associates, Sarah's made a reference to them. I think this is very important. One of the calls of both 2016 and 2024 was to enhance our spiritual lives, not just ours, but all the people who turn to RSCJs for spiritual accompaniment. So the associates are a very, very important group of people who have committed themselves to their own prayer life and maturing as men and women of prayer, and to the mission of the Society of the Sacred Heart, which is to reveal and to discover and reveal God's love in the heart of reality. In terms of our alumni and alumni, I think that we are very engaged across both countries with our ongoing relationships with alumni and alumni. I am very happy to hear Rosalie's words about the need for AASH to consider kind of a self-examination in light of where we are today and where we want to be. What does that mean for an organization like AASH? And I urge ASH to consider the same question. We're all in this process. As Sophie said, times change and we must change with them. How do we get our structures? Well, you know, an organization like this is a structure of relationships. That's what's at the heart of everything you do. You're in your own mission statement, you talk about being the source of unity among alumni and alumni, and you also talk about being able to contribute to advancing the mission of the Society of the Sacred Heart. So the quality of relationships among us is critical, and bylaws are simply statements of organization in order to ensure relationships for the sake of mission. So it's a great opportunity for you. Schools, just a quick word about schools. As Kate said, we are 25 schools, and they have been celebrating, we've all been celebrating 50 years of shared mission. We don't want to say the network is 50 years old, because actually the network is much older than that. Legally, it wasn't incorporated into 91. That's immaterial. What's material is the quality of shared mission. And that mission came together in the goals and criteria in 1975. So we've been celebrating all year long through a variety of events and programs, this 50 years of shared leadership. And I encourage you to do two things. Look at the website of both the Network of Sacred Heart Schools, and look at both the International RSCJ website and the website of the province of USC, because there you're going to find links to amazing programs. And I'm going to end with this one. There is a really wonderful new foundational document that anyone who's a member of the family of the Sacred Heart needs to read, and it's called Sophie's Gift. It's a contemporary philosophy of Sacred Heart education. And I encourage you as alumni and alumni to take a look at that philosophy. Look at the concepts that we say are absolutely significant, inherent in the way we educate, because they come directly from Sophie's charism, Sophie's gift to us, which is why we call the philosophy Sophie's Gift. But there's also a profile of a Sacred Heart educator. Well, put yourself there. Is it an accurate profile of you as an alumna or an alumnus of the Sacred Heart? I think it's a very important document, and it's the fruit of a 5-year International Education Commission that had people from 7 different countries. We had no common language. We wrote that document in Spanish and English simultaneously, and every third time we'd stop and do it in French. So it is a stunning and important foundational document. The other thing I would say that I would bring your attention to is that the Society of the Sacred Heart, as we move into the future, we see mission in terms of 4 apostolic priorities: education, spirituality, JPIC, and formation. And much of the work we're doing, and if you read Heart Magazine, which I encourage you to read, you will see us talking to this point. And then my final comment, truly final comment, some of you have asked me, how are you doing financially, Sister Cook? So let me be totally direct and straightforward, as Sophie would want me to be. Our ability to support our elder sisters is made possible through their own Social Security, their own retirement pension, which we called TIA-CREF. Some of you are familiar with it. Over time, the laws changed, and religious could no longer receive TIA-CREF because we don't pay income tax. It's those of you who love legal stuff, we can talk later. So we took all of the contracts and we put them in something very creatively called NewCo, New Company. That is our retirement fund. In addition to that, as you know, because many of you participated, we did a significant campaign between 2003 and 2013. And all of that went into, not all of that campaign, much of that campaign went towards retirement. Some of it went towards new initiatives. Some of it went to the support of sisters studying or sisters living in community. Okay, so Between the revenue from NewCo's interest and the interest of what we call the Mission and Ministry Fund, we live. Instead of all of us receiving salaries with a median age of 81, that's not possible anymore. So we are seriously engaged in an annual effort. And that effort, which we are now calling the Giving Fund, is intended to close the gap between the revenues generated by our retired sisters through Social Security and retirement, through the NewCo interest, and the cost of supporting our retired sisters. And that gap is approximately $2 million. And so that's what we try to raise every year. In addition to that, because of the campaign that many of you helped us with, the Cor Unum Legacy Society is something that members of the Sacred Heart family have joined, promising to give some of their inheritance bequest, however they do that, to the Society of the Sacred Heart. And that has made and continues to make a tremendous difference in our lives. So on behalf of all of my sisters and all of our ministries and all of our partners in mission, I thank you. I would say the Society of the Sacred Heart is alive and well. And if you want to know more about it, check out the website and talk to me while I'm still here. Okay, thanks very much.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Lindsay Hill, the Western Regional Director. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you who've traveled to join us here in Los Angeles for the 45th AASH National Conference. It's my pleasure at this time to welcome our keynote speaker, John Gary, from the Sacred Heart Prep School up in Atherton, California. In 1984, Convent of the Sacred Heart, where I attended, transitioned into a co-ed model. So please offer an enthusiastic welcome to our 2025 keynote speaker, John Gary.
All right. There we go. Yeah, a little taller up here. What an honor it is to have the opportunity to be up here today at the AASH National Conference in beautiful Los Angeles, California. I'm sure there are many of you that have traveled across the country to be here. And as a proud Sacred Heart Schools alumni, I wholeheartedly thank you for your commitment and dedication to the national Sacred Heart community. I'd like to start with a few other expressions of gratitude before we dive in. To our AASH Board of Directors, Kate Dever Sawyer, Deborah Newhouse Dunham, Marcia Truffalo, Kristen Andre, Julia Sosnivka, Andrea Brees Ferris, Suzanne Robinson, Donna Davis, Lindsay Hill, Sarah Cassidy, and Shirley Andrew for their tireless pursuit of supporting Sacred Heart Schools. To our organizers, this event has been outstanding, and we know hours and hours of effort went into making it happen. And to our storied founder, St. Madeleine Sophie Barat, who established the Schools of the Sacred Heart 225 years ago in the year 1800. We are grateful for her vision and the impact that the organization she founded has left on the world centuries after her time. Today, I'm excited to explore the 5 goals and criteria of Sacred Heart Schools and how these goals impact alumni lives even decades after graduating from their studies at Sacred Heart. The goals and criteria were first circulated in the Sacred Heart Network in 1975. And here we are 50 years later, admiring and living the goals and criteria, which capture the essence of St. Madeleine Sophie's vision of education and carry with them the wisdom of Catholic philosophy and theology from the centuries. The 5 goals for the Schools of the Sacred Heart to educate to are: Goal 1, a personal and active faith in God. Goal 2, a deep respect for intellectual values. Goal 3, a social awareness which impels to action. Goal 4, building of community as a Christian value. And goal 5, personal growth in an atmosphere of wise freedom. Our 5 goals capture our aspirations as Sacred Heart educators, and our criteria indicate to us that our goals are being lived. So let me take a step back and introduce myself. My name is John Geary. I graduated Sacred Heart Schools Atherton in the high school class of 2011. I've been an active member of the school's alumni board since 2021. After graduating Sacred Heart Schools Atherton, I went on to graduate from Northwestern University in 2015 with a degree in industrial engineering. Go Cats. After Northwestern, I started my career as a management consultant at Bain & Company in their Chicago office, after which I started Obodu, the company I've been running for the past 7 years. Obodu is the largest provider of accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, think like backyard cottages, granny flats, those kind of things, in California, and we build hundreds of homes every year. Obodu is headquartered in Redwood City, California, up in Northern California, where I live full time, with substantial operations here in the Los Angeles area as well. With my background in entrepreneurship, I'm excited to discuss how each of the 5 goals is fundamental to building a successful business from nothing. My objective is to clearly articulate how Sacred Heart education effectively serves as the foundation for entrepreneurship. Fun fact, before we get a little bit deeper, past AASH President Maureen Ryan was actually the first person to instill in me the values of a Sacred Heart education. Affectionately known to my family as Momar, Maureen was effectively the 5th sibling of my father's childhood in the western suburbs of Chicago. While not technically blood related, Maureen was part nanny, part babysitter, and part older sister to my father. And this extended to her being considered an aunt to me growing up. When the prospect arose of me potentially attending Sacred Heart Schools Atherton, Maureen was one of the largest advocates for the benefits of a Sacred Heart education. So I know Maureen's not here today, but I still want to give a heartfelt thank you to Momar. Before diving into how I interact with the 5 goals every day, building a business, I wanted to spend a bit of reflection on my time at Sacred Heart Schools Atherton. Before matriculating to Sacred Heart, I attended our local parish school, St. Simon's, for K through 8. And thus didn't attend the lower or middle school at Sacred Heart Schools Atherton, which has a preschool through 12th grade co-ed Sacred Heart school. Upon entering high school, I had to develop myself within an entirely new community. This is a really interesting time in childhood development to be thrown into a new school where you don't know anybody. You're 14 years old, you're figuring out your place in the world, and you know nobody. Talk about a time in your life when the 5 goals really, really come to action. To my understanding, Sacred Heart Schools Atherton is a unique school in the Sacred Heart Network because it's co-ed. Sacred Heart Atherton invited men into the community in 1984 in order to keep the school open. So I realized my experience was probably a little different than maybe the Sacred Heart experience each of you in this room got to experience in your time. A 14-year-old coming into a new school community is a situation where the educational institution's culture and community really come to light. I felt so accepted into the Sacred Heart Atherton community coming in as an outsider. I joined the football team, which had 2-a-day practices before school started my freshman year, and still look back very, very fondly on how quickly the other students welcomed me into their circles. Within my first few weeks on campus, I remember teachers, coaches, and administrators going out of their way to make sure I felt welcomed. This perfectly exemplifies goal 4, building of community as a Christian value. I credit my Sacred Heart education as one of the strongest foundations for the path I've taken in life. Now, let's fast forward a little bit and explore the many ways that the 5 goals apply in the daily life of an entrepreneur. First off, being an entrepreneur is super unglamorous. Correct, I said unglamorous. I know this line of work can be glamorized with your Steve Jobs and your Oprah Winfrey's of the world and TV shows like Silicon Valley on HBO, making it seem fun. Let me just disvalue of that notion right now. It's not fun. Most days are not fun. The way I describe it is the world exists in status quo. And as an entrepreneur, you're trying to build something in a world that doesn't want you to exist. So every day you're fighting both tooth and nail to carve out just a little bit of space in the world for your business. And it's kind of like a human's antibodies attacking a virus. Everything is set up for you to fail. My company has almost failed numerous times over the past 7 years. be it in the first 2 years when I lived in a horse ranch in Redwood City, California, because it was the cheapest rent, to the time I took out a huge personally guaranteed loan as a 25-year-old with no income to get my business off the ground. And every day since then has been a mix of ups and downs. In an environment like this, I found it helpful to remind myself of the grounding framework of the 5 goals of the Sacred Heart education, which apply almost perfectly to life as an entrepreneur. Let's start with goal 1, a personal and active faith in God. It all starts with an active faith in God and approaching life and work with the attitudes of the heart of Jesus, such as gratitude, generosity, compassion, and forgiveness. As I mentioned, building a business is hard, and you will face continual setbacks. Managing those setbacks and challenges with the foundation of a Catholic faith has been a massive assistance on this journey. And there's always someone that has wronged you, forgiveness, someone that needs something from you, generosity, and someone that needs help, compassion, that's taking your attention and focus away from the things you need to do to build your business. Entrepreneurship at its core reflects the ethos of joy, hope, and celebration, rooted in deep belief that there is meaning and value in life. So early on in the Obodu journey, we constantly faced an endless set of problems. My business partner and I, both raised Catholic, faced these challenges with faith and conviction that if we did as Jesus taught, we'd prevail. During the construction process of the very first home we built, we're fresh, we're green, this is new to us. We were absolutely taken advantage of by our largest vendor. We thought it was the end of Obodu and harbored very deep anger towards this individual. But we approached the situation with compassion and forgiveness, with a deeper focus on how can we solve these problems and keep the company alive. We easily could have dwelled in our anger, but our Catholic faith has taught us from day one to find forgiveness and move on. More recently, we had a customer here in the Los Angeles area that approached our team with a big problem. He didn't have the money to settle his final invoice. We had just completed his project, and at this point, the customer owed Obodu a little over $100,000. However, he had shared with us that his mother recently had an emergency health issue, which required him to front the money required for these procedures. Now, $100,000 is a lot of money, especially for a small business like ours. So what were our options? Well, we could have pursued this individual in court, and unfortunately, California law allows us to force the sale of a home to cover his debt. Many companies would have gone this route. Well, my partner and I looked inward and we asked ourselves, what is the morally right and Catholic thing to do here? After much discussion, we developed a payment plan whereby this individual was able to space out their payments over 12 months while they financially recovered from their mother's health challenges. I can tell you that our business felt the pain of not having this payment be remitted in full and on time, but approaching the situation with the attitudes of the heart of Jesus, particularly compassion and generosity, led to the best outcome for everybody. Moving on to goal 2, a deep respect for intellectual values. When building a business, you first have to learn everything you can about a market. Who's operating the market, who are your core customers, etc. The foundation of a deep respect for intellectual values allows one to be successful in this initial learning. Sacred Heart students engage in challenging experiences that inspire intellectual curiosity, a global mindset, and a lifelong love of learning. This lifelong love stands out in entrepreneurial pursuit because you absolutely have to love learning. Each day requires you to learn new things about your market, your business, your customers, your employees, your team, your investors that you didn't know the day before. Speaking specifically about my experience at Sacred Heart Atherton, the academics are really, really hard. School was a continual intellectual challenge, which required focus, attention, and deep work. But my time at Sacred Heart instilled a sense of fun and learning, which I describe today as a deep intellectual curiosity. And really that intellectual curiosity is what fuels entrepreneurs to make a dent in the world and ultimately try and change it. At the beginning of Obodu, it was critical for us to learn everything we could about ADUs. However, it was a brand new market and brand new legislation. And so this research base, of what we could learn from, was very, very small. So we took it into our own hands through a deep respect for intellectual values and tried to learn everything we could in this new growing market. We pulled a list of building permits and cold called homeowners, builders, city officials, really anybody that would pick up the phone to just develop our own unique understanding of this new market that we were trying to play in. This approach is very similar to the approach I learned for science experiments at Sacred Heart. Start with a hypothesis, run an experiment to prove or disprove that hypothesis. We applied this just in business. We learned there was a market, and through our pursuit of knowledge, we were now experts in this new emerging field with our own hypothesis on what it would take to succeed. Another area where a deep respect for intellectual values has really come into play is building a business in a highly regulated market. Geez, I'm not sure if any of you have gone through the process of building a home from scratch, but there are tons of regulatory hoops to jump through. It is hard. And that applies everywhere in the country, right? Now let's focus on California, the most regulated state in the country. The state codes, local codes, environmental codes, geology codes, energy codes, et cetera, that apply to the construction of a 500 square foot home in your backyard would astound you. In order to be competitive, you have to really, really deeply understand the laws that apply to your business. And it takes weeks and weeks and weeks of study to really understand these. Oddly enough, it kind of reminds me of studying for an AP US history exam back in high school. There's clearly a set of memorization and comprehension required, but also you have to apply that comprehension to an essay of like what it means for life today. And the only way you get through studying for an AP US history exam and deeply understand California construction laws is to have a deep lifelong love of learning. And let me tell you, I'm very grateful for the Sacred Heart education instilling that in me early. Moving on to goal 3, a social awareness that impels to action. I want to spend a bit more time on this one, as a social awareness that impels to action is quintessentially entrepreneurship. Sacred Heart educators prepare students to serve the common good in an independent world while developing a lifelong commitment to service. There are 2 parts to this goal, and each is wildly important in the pursuit of entrepreneurship. Part 1, a social awareness, being physically, mentally, and emotionally aware of the social fabric of a community. This is so core to building a business, starting with market selection and value prop solution, but also scaling to building a team and a customer base. A leader must always have a deep social awareness to be effective. Social awareness is one of those things that applies to kind of most things in life. And being aware of how the world works is one of the fundamental growth opportunities that we all as humans continually strive to get better at. Part 2, that impels to action. Being aware is one thing, but then acting on that awareness is an entirely different step. Action is challenging. It's ambiguous. It requires energy and effort, and it can be risky. But ultimately, action is what creates and solidifies change. One embarks on an entrepreneurial journey when they identify a change that they believe needs to be made in the world. When I look back at my Sacred Heart educational experience, I can think of dozens of times when the concept of goal 3 was at the forefront of our learning. One example that really stood out to me, when I attended Sacred Heart Atherton, it was highly encouraged to engage in a service trip. Quite literally, a trip with a small group of classmates to do good in another community. Now, there are organized trips to many places: Taos, New Mexico, Chile, Peru. But the trip that I embarked on for 2 summers in a row was to Pacaitas, Costa Rica. Now, I know what you're thinking. John, you went to Costa Rica for 2 summers to do service work? That sounds like a vacation. You're telling me you did service work down there? Yes. Very truthfully, yes. Pacaitas is a small, deeply impoverished rural town in the mountain jungles of Costa Rica. Essentially no running water, enough electricity to power a few lights, and that's about it. When our small group of classmates came into the town, we stayed in the homes of the town's residents, getting to live and learn with those families. But we also did back-breaking work. Repairing the decrepit school in the community? Check. Digging new drainage ditches? Check. Running water lines to homes so that homes would have internal sinks? Check. Talk about getting out of your comfort zone as a 15-year-old who was raised in Northern California. This is my first time leaving the country, and it was to experience deep poverty, but also was to take action and bring some of the first world solutions to help a community 2,000 miles away. It was a deeply Sacred Heart learning experience, but it also really helped instill the sense of impels to action. Social awareness is part 1, understanding what needs to be fixed. Impels to action is part 2, actually going to fix things. So let's see how this goal manifests itself in entrepreneurship. From a macro perspective, In the original formation of the company, we took a specific focus on housing and its importance to the social fabric of our communities. Housing is one of the largest social issues of our generation, and access to high integrity, high quality, and affordable housing is elusive to many. I was born and raised in a housing developer family. I've been around housing my entire life. It felt important to continually focus on this as I embarked on my own entrepreneurial journey. I've been acutely aware of the housing challenges growing up in Silicon Valley and seeing home prices skyrocket over my lifetime. Truly, it feels like home ownership is out of reach to my generation, let alone making rent each month. This awareness impelled me to work on just one small solution. Tying back to goal 3, I was lucky enough to have a deep awareness for the problems surrounding housing. But we didn't stop there. It was our action that we felt impelled to take that ultimately has caused the impact on the hundreds of homes we've built over the past 7 years. Looking more micro, the concept of social awareness that impels to action can be found in the day-to-day and week-to-week of any entrepreneur. One story that comes to mind is the formation of the pre-approved ADU program in San Jose, California. Bit specific here. San Jose, California, population 1 million people, has a big pro-housing policy. And in the first few years of Obodu, we noticed a really interesting thing. Despite this pro-housing policy, the internal systems to actually approve that housing were virtually impossible to navigate. We became aware of this after permitting multiple projects in San Jose. And in talking with many of our peers, it was clear this was an issue for everybody trying to build housing in this big city. So you can imagine what we did next. We took action. It was in the interest of the common good in the community of San Jose for their systems and processes to reflect the intentions of its elected leaders. We approached the chief building official with an idea. How about we pre-approve homes to be built in San Jose, which could be reviewed in 1 day instead of 9 months? Makes sense, right? Why review the same house over and over and over if it's just same structure being built on a different property? Crazy idea, but it worked. A few months later, San Jose launched the first pre-approved ADU program in the state, which has allowed ADU projects to be completed in 2 months instead of 2 years, which is a truly impressive improvement over the status quo. This is the definition of goal 3. Continue to look for issues that are detrimental to a community, and then taking action to rectify those issues. Moving to goal 4, the building of community as a Christian value. A Sacred Heart education promotes the inherent dignity of the human person and strives for relationships characterized by inclusion and mutual respect. Members of the Sacred Heart community practice and teach with a spirit of patience and reconciliation the principles of nonviolence and conflict management. In reflecting on my time at Sacred Heart Schools Atherton, I would say goal 4 is one of the aspects that stands out decades later as a unique strength of the community. Members of the community cared about and supported each other, be it sports games, theater shows, math and science competitions, or just day-to-day life of high school. The community always showed up in support. In pulling from my personal experience playing 2 sports in high school, there were plenty of examples of conflict within our teams, within opposing teams, with officials. But what I always remember is how we were coached to manage that conflict with peace and respect. There was no place for letting emotions run wild, and we learned week in and week out how to maturely manage that conflict. I only say this because this is one of the most important life skills, in my opinion, how to build relationships and community with others, particularly when you don't see eye to eye with them. I'm not going to wade into politics, but this is the closest I will get. I think we can all look at goal 4 in today's high conflict environment and remind ourselves how important it is to build community as a Christian value, even when engaging with others who may not share our worldview. When building a business from scratch, community is everything. Community with your team, community with your customers, community with your vendors, community with your investors. In our business, community drives our ability to grow. We must build lasting relationships in the neighborhoods that we're working in. However, conflict also frequently arises in the world of housing and construction. It's a space that creates a range of emotions, and we have to consistently focus on conflict management within the communities that we're building in. In looking at our experience with entrepreneurship, there are countless examples of when building community was the correct response in a period of conflict. In one of our early projects in the Bay Area, there was a neighbor of an Obodu customer that was irate that the family we were working with was building an ADU in their backyard. And this is understandable. The neighbor was worried that the ADU would detrimentally impact their quality of life. Now, according to California state law, the neighbor legally had zero influence on this project. However, they did everything they could think of to prevent its construction. They called the local building and planning department. They submitted letters to city council. They even went door to door on a door knocking campaign to try and raise frustration amongst the neighbors. Our team was just at a loss of how to reduce this conflict on this project, such that our customer and their irate neighbor would be able to move on and be neighborly moving forward. We approached this neighbor with compassion and from a point of education, with the goal of at least building acceptance with this project. Fast forward to the end of the project, and this irate neighbor cooled down after seeing the joy that the ADU brought our customer. See, the neighbor didn't realize that our customer was building the ADU in their backyard so that their aging mother can move in and live close to her children and her grandchildren. And that neighbor, the irate one, realized that ADUs have a really great place in the community. So much so that this irate neighbor became an Abodu customer a few weeks later. All to say, a deep focus on community building has positive impacts you may never expect. Another aspect of building community as a Christian value that is critical in building a company is the act of building a strong community within your team of employees. Culture at a small and growing company is everything. And as we've built and grown our team, being deliberate about that culture requires deep thought and intention. Do you want to have a culture that allows people to get away with small things? Do you want to build a culture where people are afraid to raise problems for fear of backlash? Do you want to build a culture that lacks accountability, but also lacks support? My answer to all of these was absolutely not. And when I thought about a culture that I wanted to emulate, I looked directly at Sacred Heart Schools Atherton. I would characterize the Sacred Heart culture as one where achievement is encouraged and recognized, but also one where taking risks in the pursuit of growth is encouraged. Where problems were encouraged to be surfaced, where we addressed issues head on instead of hiding from them. I always felt that a culture where people can feel comfortable celebrating good things, but also having open and honest discussion about the bad things is one that builds and cultivates an amazing community. And to me, this is one of the quintessential definitions of Goal 4 and something I've taken deeply to heart as I've built Abodu. Now, moving on to Goal 5, a personal growth in an atmosphere of wise freedom. Members of the Sacred Heart community grow in courage and confidence as they discover new abilities, cultivate strengths, learn from mistakes, develop empathy, and exercise resilience in meeting challenges. All members of the community endeavor to practice informed, ethical decision-making and accountability. In my time at Sacred Heart, I think some of my deepest personal growth came on the football field. I know it's a bit cliche, but I think team sports really create an environment to explore one's mental and leadership abilities during their learning experience. In high school, I was not the biggest or most athletic guy. There were countless of my peers more physically athletic than me. However, I looked at my lack of athleticism as something I couldn't really control, and it was a chance to personally push myself in areas that I could control. My junior year, there was an opening at the quarterback position. Our previous starter had graduated the year before. I'd never looked at myself as a leader at this point, let alone the starting quarterback for my high school. And I never even played the position. But my football coaches knew I played baseball and asked if I would consider trying out. I was certainly nervous, knowing that two of the most athletic guys on the team had their eyes set on being Sacred Heart Prep's next QB1. But I figured if the coaches asked me to try it, I got to give it a shot. This began a journey that led to a place I never could have imagined. It was clear in tryouts that I was not the shoo-in for this role. The other two guys had stronger arms. They were faster than me, and they had actually played the position before. Fast forward a few weeks, it's time for our first game. I did not win the starting job. One of the other more athletic guys did, but I gladly took the third string title. Over the first two games that season, the starting QB struggled, the second string QB struggled, and after a particularly tough first two games, coaches tapped me to try to pull things together in the fourth quarter of a game we were losing pretty badly. We did not win the game, but I showed up and led the offense to a couple decent drives. Next thing I know, it's game 3, and my name is next to the QB1 line in the depth chart. I was suddenly the starting quarterback. I was being thrust into the leadership role on the football team. essentially the CEO of the football team. And I was not the loudest guy on the field. And I guarantee you that 95% of the team did not look at me as the leader. But there I was. And as the season continued, we began to win games and our offense became well known across the league. By the end of that season, I had emerged as a leader on the team. And coming into senior year, I maintained that path and led Sacred Heart Atherton to the school's first section title. This was a huge deal. We were not a football school, but this was the first season of what turned into a 15-year football dynasty, which I'm still very proud of to this day. Many state championships since then, let alone Division I football players, and even a few NFL players coming through Sacred Heart Atherton. That dynasty continues to this day. And while the success of that team was impressive, it was very, very cool to be a part of, I look back at my personal growth in that period as one of the single largest accelerants to how I view myself. Sacred Heart gave me the opportunity to grow in courage and confidence as I discovered new abilities, cultivated strengths, learned from mistakes, developed empathy, and exercised resilience in meeting challenges. For that, I will always be very, very grateful. Now, having been lucky enough to experience such personal growth in high school, it's only fitting that I chose a career that has forced personal growth in an atmosphere of wise freedom every single day. At its core, entrepreneurship is the definition of personal growth in an atmosphere of wise freedom. You have the utmost freedom as an entrepreneur. No boss, no fixed hierarchy, no bureaucracy, but also no guaranteed paycheck or income. That's pretty scary. It's a deeply personal journey of growth where one must do a large magnitude of tasks that they have not done before, such as accounting, sales, operations, customer service, hiring, firing. Yes, I've become proficient at every single one of those things at this point. But each day as an entrepreneur has personal growth and a large magnitude of freedom. The best entrepreneurs seize this opportunity for personal growth and want to get better each day. And I can't think of a more applicable experience to Goal 5. Something that's just as important to Goal 5 as personal growth is the ability to learn from mistakes. In order to learn from mistakes, you have to make mistakes. And let me tell you, I've made thousands of mistakes over my career, all of which have contributed to my learning and understanding to become a better leader. Thinking back on the largest mistakes, it often boils down to people mistakes. Choosing the wrong person to hire into a role, choosing the wrong vendor to work with on a project, choosing the wrong customer to serve. Most mistakes come down to kind of those people challenges. See, I was lucky to learn at a Sacred Heart school where wise freedom was provided early and often. But I also learned that operating in that wise freedom is what leads to growth. Early on in my entrepreneurial journey, I absolutely took for granted the responsibility that comes with wise freedom. Because in the broader world, not everyone can handle that wise freedom, be it an employee, a vendor, or a customer. Learning from these mistakes has been instrumental in my personal growth. I've learned that encouraging others to take a leap, to make the mistake, and then to provide that safety net for failure allows those around you to grow faster or stronger faster. Ultimately, learning from my own mistakes has pushed me to give others the confidence to make those same mistakes as well. Providing an atmosphere of wise freedom is one of the hallmarks of a Sacred Heart education. And Sacred Heart educators deeply understand that one of their core roles is to help their students grow in that atmosphere. When I reflect on my experience building in Bodu, I realize that my role has grown eerily similar to that of a Sacred Heart educator, cultivating and developing that atmosphere of wise freedom within our team, such that everyone can pursue their own personal growth. At the end of the day, I view personal growth as one of the most rewarding aspects in life. And I believe many entrepreneurs chase their dream in the pursuit of always wanting to get better. A network of schools that fosters that journey of confidence building and discovering new abilities is profoundly good for the world and good for our future. So, as you can see, a Sacred Heart education is an outstanding foundation for future entrepreneurs. One might even say Sacred Heart education instills the original entrepreneurial pursuit of St. Madeleine Sophie and St. Rose Philippine Duchesne, the original founders of the Sacred Heart Network. The 5 goals provide a clear and compelling framework to aspire to, and each are directly applicable to the entrepreneurial journey in any way, shape, or form. I am so grateful and honored to have attended Sacred Heart Schools Atherton, and I look forward to the future entrepreneurs that come from the Sacred Heart Network across the country and the world. We have a very bright future ahead. Thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference and your stay here in beautiful Los Angeles.
He's trying to run away. Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask? John, I see anybody? Come on back.
Any questions? Yes. Wise freedom. So personal growth and atmosphere of wise freedom. When I think about wise freedom, it's you don't have these constraints around you. You have, in a truest sense, the freedom to do anything you'd like, anything you want. And I think about personal growth in that wise freedom as an inherent combination. When you have that freedom to do anything, it can be good or bad, right? Bad means you can waste time. You can focus on things that don't move the needle, that aren't as important to the growth of your business. One of the biggest mental challenges is deciphering the difference between good and bad and what's actually important. And so when I think about wise freedom, I actually think that's one of like the bigger mental challenges and struggles of an entrepreneur is how to navigate all of that freedom to do something that is actually conducive to building your business. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Wait, you need the.
Sorry. Our school in Grand Coteau started a boys' school about 17 years ago, and my son is in kindergarten there. And I always think about, I know a lot of female alums, and my daughter's there too. She's a baby there. But just hearing your story makes me really excited to have a son raised in the 5 goals, and I just hope he accomplishes the type of things you've accomplished. So thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that. It's very kind. Question.
Given your success, have you been approached about a buyout? And if you were, given all of the work and foundation that you've built, how would you approach that?
Wow. Hard questions right off the bat. In general terms, yes, we have been approached. It's an exciting business in a new category. We, to date, have decided that we are having fun and enjoying what we're doing and feel there's a lot of work left to do in the communities that we're serving. And so I would never say never, but I feel like I've got a long road in front of me to keep building what we're doing. So it's a no for now, but not a no for always. Yes.
What's the R value of your house? I was just looking at the website. So I just want to know, do they do for the Pacific Northwest?
Yes, we used to serve Seattle. We've actually not served Seattle for about 2 years now. But our value, for those who don't know, is a insulation value that it gets applied to windows, exterior walls, yada, yada. We do R30 in the walls, R40 in our floor systems, and R40 in our roofing systems. That'll do. There we go. Great question. Yes.
But I just want to say that, wait for the microphone, because when you broadcasting, people can only hear us speaking into the microphone.
Very helpful.
Not a question, but just a comment. As a former Sacred Heart educator, you're a beautiful reflection of your Sacred Heart education. And thank you for sharing your message and how you've taken forth the gift you've been given. It's quite impressive.
It's truly a gift. And, I think Shannon and I get to speak a lot about this. Sorry, I didn't mean to call on you too, Shannon. I lived in Chicago for quite a bit after college. And when I moved back to California, one of the priorities I had was to get back involved with Sacred Heart Schools Atherton. I continually feel so blessed to have gotten to attend that school. And I thank my parents still every single time I see them. But I think it's important to think about, that foundation that we were lucky enough to build in those formative years and how that continues to impact us decades and decades and decades in the future. And I hope, 40, 50, 60, 70 years from now, I can still maintain that reflection on the benefits of Sacred Heart.
John, where is your Northern California office located? How close to Sacred Heart?
We're actually like 5 minutes away from the Sacred Heart Schools Atherton campus, which is very convenient for our alumni board meetings. I can just turn right down the road and get there. So not too far away.
Again, a comment, not a question. I have a daughter and son-in-law who are thinking of starting a construction business. in Florida, they are not Sacred Heart educated at all. But I'm going to hopefully get a recording of this to send to them, because all of what you're talking about, the philosophies, really go beyond someone who is Sacred Heart educated.
Yeah.
And can, I hope, shape what they're going to try to do to become solid members of their community and go forward doing great things. So
Oh.
thank you.
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
You have any plans to do any development of ADUs or small units in Costa Rica?
In Costa Rica.
Yeah, kind of make full
Great
circle.
question. Not at the moment, but that's another never say never. Building a business in California is hard enough, let alone expanding to other states and other countries. But when we think about a 10-year or 20-year horizon, yes, that is very much so in our ambitions to do projects like that. Oftentimes, it's another kind of time back to an entrepreneur. You can have tunnel vision on the next day, the next week, the next month. But yes, when we do pull up and we think about 20-year horizons, it's very, very much so on our roadmap. Thank you.
Well, this is just kind of a comment. My husband grew up in St. Louis, and for the first half of our marriage, we lived in St. Louis, and his family is very Sacred Heart. But what's interesting is some of the guys that he went to high school with went to Sacred Heart for, I can't remember the name of the school, and Jeannie wouldn't know. What was a grade school with Bear Hall? Yeah. And I can't tell you how often and how many beers later into the evening, Bear Hall would come up. And it's funny. I mean, it would have no bearing on anything we were doing. And these kids, we're all 73 now.
Kids, definitely still kids.
Had such fond memories.
Yes.
And it's nice to hear that the co-ed schools have, if I had a son, I would sure as heck want him at Sacred Heart. So
I sure as heck hope my children go to Sacred Heart. No, to continue on that sentiment, the relationships that you built, I was lucky enough to build within Sacred Heart Schools Atherton. I came in yesterday a bit early for this, and I had lunch with one of my best friends from Sacred Heart Atherton who now lives in Los Angeles. And another one of my best friends was in town in San Francisco this past weekend. So I got to see him, and it was fun to reflect on, wow, just in the past week, I got to share a meal and see two of my best high school friends before the reflection I shared today. It's a very special place and something to be very genuinely grateful for. Yes.
I don't have a son, but I hang out with my neighbor's son a lot. He's at my house. So is there a STEMs? Is that science technology thing at Atherton? Was it there when you were in high school, or the program sort of developed?
Great question. So STEM started, I remember that became more of a concept when I was in college. There was a lot of, I remember we had an AP computer science course my junior year, which all of my other friends in high schools in the area, that was very foreign to them. When I look at Sacred Heart Atherton now, there is a very, very heavy STEM component. I think there's a robotics lab and going back on campus now is a whole different experience. There's a basement full of machines. We did not have that while I was there, but it was the early innings of that where, I think Sacred Heart Schools Atherton might be a great spot then. I believe they do teach woodworking now. Thank you.
It occurs to me that we live in a world where parents are frantic on the education of their children.
Yeah.
And I wish there were a way that we could bottle your message and give it to people so that they would realize that there are avenues of education that educate the whole person.
Yeah.
You've done a great job today.
Thank you.
And my other wish would be that every teacher who ever taught you would hear this presentation, because I think it would be a psychological paycheck that would break the bank.
That is very kind of you to say. And I, through my engagement with the Sacred Heart Alumni Board over the past couple of years, I've tried to make that a point of being back on campus. Obviously, not all my teachers that were there when I was in high school are still there, but some are. In a special memory I'll share, I was invited to come back for a career day about a year and a half or 2 years ago to speak to seniors that were going off to college about, what to think about. And the moderator of that panel was Dr. Guy Latier, who was my AP Physics teacher that I had for 2 different classes across my junior and senior year. And after that panel, I just walked around the campus for 2 hours with Dr. Latier, just chatting, catching up on life, talking work, talking family. And Dr. Latier ultimately retired last year, and he sent me a very thoughtful note on his retirement, dwelling back on that 2-hour walk we got to take. And I think it was a very special kind of full circle moment where you get to say, you were actually the inspiration for a lot of what I've done implicitly and explicitly. And I think it's a very special thing for an educator to get to see the seeds that they planted, when 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, and get to see what that looks like 10 and 20 years in the future. So I think it's a prerogative we all have to go back to our educators and say thank you. It's not an easy job.
I really thank you for your presentation. I'm from St. Louis. My husband has owned his own business.
Oh, yeah.
And he is not Sacred Heart educated, but I am. And our daughters are, and our granddaughters are. He truly believes in it. And we have encouraged him to live like you live. And I feel like that the women are tremendous supporters of this philosophy. So thank you.
It's a tough gig, but it's worth doing. Thank you. Anything else?
Thank you, John. And again, I know it's listed in the program, and Shannon Elenoska says, actually, I don't see her, but she must have run out the door. She's going to block my email and phone to say thank you again for helping. Thank you for putting this together and putting John in touch with us. It's been awesome. We will break now for lunch. Please be back here promptly at 1:00 for general session 2. Was there another housekeeping? It's going to be outside buffet style in the atrium, and seating is at the tables out, and they will be blocked off for us alone. But I want to thank again John and Shannon and everybody for coming in, and let's have some lunch and enjoy. Thank you.